All right. So thank you so much. We have Dr. Fatimah Jackson-Best with us today. Is that how you like to be referred to as?
You can call me that for sure. You can just call me Fatima as well. It might be a little bit long to like do the whole title, but whatever you're comfortable with.
So tell me about your name because that's a really cool last name, Jackson-Best. What's that about?
Yeah, so I received, so Fatima obviously is my first name. Jackson is Jackson Best is just my hyphenated last name. So it comes from, my family and just, my history, which is basically African American and Bajan, which is the island of Barbados. I was born here in Toronto.
Mhm.
So like my name is like a combination of kind of a combination of all of my identities and heritages.
That is really cool. So is do you have any siblings? Do they also go by
I do have
Jackson-Best?
siblings. It's like a very long story, but we actually all have different last names.
Okay.
We had really young parents, and like they were married super like a long time ago. But yeah, we all have different last names, which is really funny. But I do have siblings. I'm the oldest.
Mhm.
I have three brothers, two of which are like very close to me in age, and then I have a 13-year-old brother who I'm extremely obsessed with. I'm like always in his business, always wanting to like interact. He's at that age now where he can like take it or leave it.
Yeah,
And then I have a sister who is 25 years old.
that's awesome. And yeah, I was going to ask you why you have all different last names, but I'm sure that's probably a very
That's
complicated
a whole
story.
different
Yeah.
podcast, yeah. But we all look alike. If you see my siblings though, you know that they're my siblings because it's basically my face on a male's body or another girl's body.
So, right now obviously it's a really like heightened emotional time. And what are you doing lately to self-care and take care of yourself?
Yeah, I've been saying this like for days. It feels like well, it definitely is weeks. I'm a big bike rider. I love bicycling. It's one of my favorite things to do when there's good weather. So, we've kind of been having good weather since April. And because of COVID, I just became really aware of like, not being sedentary all the time.
Mhm.
So as soon as the weather got better, I took my bike into the shop and got it tuned up, and I've just been doing like really nice long bike rides. I live in Toronto, so the on the weekends sometimes the lakeshore part of the lakeshore will be closed down, and so you're able to drive up and down lakeshore. I guess it's Boulevard, up and down like for almost like so many kilometers. So like this weekend I did a 27-kilometer
Wow.
ride. Yeah, I love biking. Like I really, really, really love biking. But what I find is that because of like the news cycle and just everything that's been happening, like last week I found myself going outside to get perspective or clear my mind or just release energy. And it's been really helpful. And when I
Not as
calculated
helpful
all,
as our Zoom classes, right?
no, honestly, that was a whole different thing, right? Like that was really helpful for COVID.
Yeah.
And getting through Ramadan and COVID, having that like standing session at 6:30, I think it was really, really helpful, and also built my endurance up because now I feel like I'm doing way longer bike rides because my stamina has been continually been building from those
You're just
classes.
lapping everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I do what I can. I'm like not the fastest. I'm not the most like wild bike rider, but I do love biking. And last week I noticed that when I calculated all the kilometers I did for the whole week, especially that last week was really heightened due to like all the stuff about police brutality and all the protests and just what's been going on in our world. At the end of the week, I calculated it and I had did 64 kilometers for the week, which
Wow.
is
I'm
a
sure
lot.
that that helps you release a lot of steam, a lot of energy. Um,
Absolutely.
so tell me about how you grew up. I did look. There's a lot of like stuff about you on the internet. You're very well accomplished, and yeah, tell me about how you grew up because I did read that you grew up in an Islamic school and that you were in Mississauga or Toronto, and I'd like to hear from you.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was born in Toronto, but when I was really small, just a few months old, my parents moved to the United States. My mom is American. And they were really, they moved around quite a bit, mostly in the southern United States, looking for like a safe place to raise like 3 Black Muslim children. We lived in Florida for the longest, and then we moved back to Toronto when I was about 8 years old. And around maybe 2 years later, I ended up starting at ISNA Islamic School, which is in Mississauga. So
Hmm.
I was really brought up in like 2 Islamic environments. One that was a community of mostly Black Muslims that I come from, mostly people who have our parents and grandparents had converted to the religion or have converted to the religion, and they found each other just through community making. So that's one community that I grew up in, and then I grew up in like the larger kind of like more, like the more the larger Muslim community, which I became connected to through ISNA Islamic Community School, which is their elementary school. I went there until about grade 8, and then I went away to boarding school, to a Muslim girls boarding school in California. Then I came
Wow.
back after about 2 years, and then I've just been, I was in Toronto. I finished high school in Toronto, and went to university at York University, then U of T for my PhD. And around that time, which was 10 years ago now, I moved to Barbados for 5.5 years. And that's where I was still a student at the University of Toronto, but I did a research project out in Barbados around maternal depression.
Hmm.
And it was really like one of the first research projects that I was engaged in. And it really, that's where a lot of my TED talk was based off of that research. It's been like one of my most favorite, and also the most longevity in terms of research that I probably ever experienced. People still ask me to do like sessions and keynotes about that research, which is amazing. But yeah, I grew up mostly in Toronto for the most part after moving back to the States. And yeah, I'm a pretty proud Torontonian, that's for sure. Even when I lived in Barbados, there was a couple of years where I lived in Ottawa and then in Trinidad for work. But I always knew that if I was coming back to Ontario for like long term, I would be in Toronto, and that's where I'm living now and working.
Wow. Saying this, wow, you've really you've done a lot. Um, why was doing research specifically on Black women's mental health so important to you?
It was important to me because, well, first of all, I identify as a Black woman, and I am a very firm believer in people doing research that is close to their identities and that they can understand. I think it definitely brings in a certain amount of nuance and understanding that is not necessarily possible for people who are from outside of communities. And also because for Black communities, there's not a lot of research that is generated, or at the time, there wasn't a lot of research that was being generated
Mhm.
about maternal mental health in the Caribbean.
Yeah.
It's been increasing a little bit more now, but I just noticed that there was a gap. And so I knew I wanted to fit in, and I wanted to be able to relate to people in my research in a way that would be helpful and also facilitative of the research project. So that's what really prompted me to do that work, and just generally wanting to do research that was based in the Caribbean. A lot of the research that I come across, like in my master's or even at the PhD level, it would be about, maybe Black communities, but there wasn't a lot of Caribbean focused research. So I just wanted to add to that, basis of knowledge, or that base of knowledge.
And tell me about Muslims in the Caribbean, because I don't think I've met anyone like you who is Bayesian and Muslim.
Yeah, well, there. So people always ask for sure. A lot of times when people meet me, like, or they hear my name, people just don't know where to place you or how to place you. So in the Caribbean, there are Muslim communities in different islands, right? The Caribbean is made up of so many different island nations with different histories that involve colonization of different, colonizers from Europe mainly, and also now the United States. But Barbados is a small island in the Eastern Caribbean. Its population is about 270,000 people, so it's a small island in that respect. But it's incredibly powerful. Everybody knows, Barbados now because of the one Rihanna. There was a time when like you would say Barbados and people had no idea what you were talking about. But it's an island that I started going to when I was about 8 years old. My dad was born there, and his family is mainly from there. And the Muslim community there is, from what I've experienced, it's very much split along racial lines. It's small already to begin with,
Mhm.
but we do have Indian descent Bajan Muslims who came from Bengal and from parts of India over 100 years ago and came to the island to do merchant work, mostly, right? And so from that, you have like a very strong Indian descent Bajan community there. And you also have Black Bajan people as well, Bajan Muslims, who have converted over, the past decades. My father actually converted in Barbados when he was about 15 or 16 years old. And then before he came and moved to Toronto, immigrated here. So
So
there is
what is the dominant religion of Barbados?
Christianity. Yeah, Christianity is like by far the dominant religion. So in Barbados, Islam is actually like very, very small population of Muslims, really, maybe 1%.
So what is it like for you then to go there as a Muslim woman and present your research? And are there any sort of hurdles that you need to get over?
I mean, yeah, there's certain hurdles for sure that I experienced in Barbados. Like, I think that the number one hurdle that I experienced when I was in Barbados was the lack of access to mosque space, which was really startling for me. Like, I'd heard about women not being able to pray in the mosque, and I'd been into different mosques in Toronto where the women's place the space to pray is small or not very nice or not very clean. But in Barbados and mostly in the mosques that Indian descent people frequent, which is 2 or 3 of the major mosques on the island, they do not allow women in. They don't have women area for women to pray, and culturally it's just not part of their practice for women to go to the mosque. It's more of a male space. So that was really, really difficult for me because, I'm used to having a choice, if I want to go to Friday prayer, if I want to go to pray any prayer, I could just walk into almost any mosque in Toronto. And so in Barbados, that was probably the hardest part of being a Muslim there. The community is also quite small. My dad is well known and respected there, so that was helpful, but it was still difficult to navigate the space and not have the kind of outlets that I'm used to in comparison to Toronto.
Right. And now tell me about your mom's side, because you said your mom is African American. And like, pardon me, what does that really mean, African American?
So it just means that my mom's family is essentially the descendants, or my mom is a descendant of, in people who were enslaved over generations. My mom's family is originally from the southern United States, which we know slavery occurred all across the United States, but we know that it lasted in the southern United States very long, of the United States. So in America, basically, or from America.
Sorry, I think the internet got a little bit in the way.
Yeah, I saw that it looked unstable. Sorry about that. It's probably my fault.
You mentioned you also went to and lived in California.
Mm-hmm.
Was that because of where your mom was from?
No, so my mom is actually from the Midwest. She's from a state called Indiana, and her family is from the southern United States. So California is like not really anything to do with our family. It just so happened that this new, at the time, was a new Muslim girls boarding school had opened, and they, accepted me, and that's where I ended up going. California is a beautiful place. I always think about the sunsets there and women in my school. That was really amazing. And also the privilege of being able to be in, Muslim schools, private schools for a lot of my life before going to university. It's definitely been hard as a Black person in some respects when you're going to a school where you're not seen in the majority, but it's also been really great for my spiritual growth.
That's amazing. And so what are some cultural differences between your mom and your dad's side, between being Bayesian and African American?
This is a good question because I think sometimes people think that, Black just means the same thing. Like there are nuances even between like islands that are 45-minute flight from each other. You know what I mean? Like
right.
We are not the same. So I think like some of the biggest differences are, oh my gosh, what can I think? Well, food for sure. There's like some things that we eat that are similar, but my mom, like for my birthday, my family brought me like a big, like all my favorite foods that are African American. So it's like cornbread, rice and peas, which is also Caribbean, but like collard greens, fried chicken, which we also eat in Barbados. But it's like, you know, something that was adopted, I think, over
Mm,
time. The
yeah.
food is definitely different, but also, you know, the ways that people understand Blackness are also different, right? So like in America, I think for African Americans, like my mom has explained, like you're always aware of you being Black, right? Like
Mhm.
because Blackness in America means a particular thing, it's a generational thing. Whereas in the Caribbean, in Barbados, Black people are the majority, but race, as my dad would explain it, is experienced differently. It's a lot of times it's experienced through you know, class. So, you know, being poor is associated with being Black, for example. But Blackness is not, it's not the same kind of meaning system attached to Blackness for some people in the Caribbean.
And how did your mom and dad meet, out of curiosity?
So, oh my God, that's a wild story. So my mom and my dad met when they were teenagers. My dad had immigrated to Toronto from Barbados. My grandmother had come up to the country first to work, and and like many Caribbean people do, my dad and my uncle stayed in Barbados with my great grandparents, their grandparents. And then, you know, my grandmother sent for my dad and my uncle, and they moved up to Toronto. By now, my dad had become a Muslim when he was 16, and so he was like, you know, practicing Muslim, and he was like meeting other Black Muslims from the continent of Africa, from other places in the Caribbean, African Americans, African Canadian people, etc. And he would be at the mosque and stuff. And my mom's family, so my mom's mom is like such an enigma. She is like, well, like the best word for her is a hippie. She's a massive hippie, very bohemian. And the summer before, her whole family, mom's whole family had gone to West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, etc. And my grandmother and her husband, who's my mom's stepfather, at the time, which is where I got the Jackson last name from, they were like, okay, we're moving to Africa. So they were in America at the time. So they were going to go to move there through Canada. So they had come up to Toronto. And the story goes that my mom's stepfather, they were in a taxi and he left all of their passports and the flight tickets. And this is like the early 80s or something. He left it all in a taxi and then they got stranded in Toronto. And at the time they happened to be Muslim because my grandmother, as I said, she was very bohemian. They were Jewish, they were Jehovah's Witness, I think, and then they had
Wow.
Muslim at the time. And so they were going to the same mosque as as my dad. And my
Right.
mom and dad met there, and then I was born not too long afterwards.
Wow. What is meant to be will be, I suppose.
It's they're not together anymore, but honestly, like they're really good friends. And the story is like you can't even make it up.
That's fantastic. It's great that they have a connection, and it's interesting that to me it seems like your identity is very important to you, and you
Mhm.
having a connection to going back to your roots um, is a key to all your research and your success, and uh, from what I understand is a big motivator to you. Something
Mhm.
that you also did that was interesting to me is that you did this project um, with a Trinidadian NGO,
Mhm.
and you were highlighting stories of LGBTQ people.
Mhm.
Now, that is a huge taboo, especially as a Muslim person, to
Mhm.
do any sort of focus on those types of people. So, could you talk about that, what you did exactly? And was it, I mean, uh, how much of a taboo is it to speak about that in certain circles?
Well, I mean, I think that it really depends on the circle that you're speaking in. Like for me, doing that research is like it's an honor and it's a privilege. Again, research on LGBT communities in the Caribbean it's an under-researched population due to marginalization. In many different places in the Caribbean, buggery or homosexuality are outlawed. In Barbados, it's one of the few islands where both like homosexuality for men and women are outlawed in Barbados, which is very, very unusual. If I'm
Yeah.
not getting it incorrectly, but there's just a lot of institutionalized homophobia in the region, which is actually all from colonialism. It's all brought in from like colonizers from, you know, mostly British colonizers. So, and
Right.
it's just been held over. So it's not indigenous to the region at all. So when I think about the region like that, and I think about populations that have been doubly, triply marginalized, like it's like my duty as a researcher. If someone asks me to do that work, it's my duty and it's my privilege to do it. So I was invited I was invited to collaborate on this project called Your Story in Trinidad with this NGO called I Am One, and I'm still involved with them. And so we did this project that was looking at the lived experiences, which included the health, social support, family support of LGBT people on the island. And I've been also really fortunate to be able to do a lot of different mental health related workshops every year, except for last year, but for about 4 or 5 years, I've gone to give a session on mental health stressors and facilitators to wellness for LGBTQ people. Sometimes women identified, also
Mhm.
trans people have participated in those workshops. So
Mhm.
like for me, the work that I do is about justice and like doing right and making sure we're amplifying information that's good and helpful to communities. And so like from that respect, I don't care who it's taboo for, because
Mhm.
it speaks to me, and all the research that I do speaks to me.
Yeah, and that stood out to me, especially because, like, the atmosphere in the Muslim community. Um, I mean, you don't even acknowledge,
Hmm.
LGBTQ. So, is that research something you share with the Muslim community as well?
I feel like, so I'm thinking about like my opportunities to share that information. I know that so a couple of years ago, there was a Black Muslim at Iftar that I was invited to be a guest speaker for. In that venue, I spoke about the research that I was doing, because the moderator was like really invested in unpacking that, and she was asking like, you know, like how do I balance my like Islamic identity with like this research? And I was like, I don't see like these things as being disconnected. Like I
Hmm.
don't see like how my religion or how people interpret religion has anything to do with like my professional capacities as a researcher, right? And I don't look at like I don't think that kind of that I don't think that's helpful really, because there are Muslims who are gay, right? And there's research that needs to be done about those intersections and about what that experience is, right, in regards to mental health, theology, etc. Right? So I think that if we're pretending that we're somehow not supposed to engage in that kind of work, I don't think it really does anybody any kind of service. I think it does a complete disservice, and I
Hmm.
just don't believe in like religion. I don't believe that religion is supposed to be used like that. I don't think so. That's not
I
even.
I I I concur, but when you're working in the communities, there's like, I do find it's very fear based, and then there's like, just things you do not. For example, if you did share that in some circles, they might not want to talk to you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah.
in that sense, it can be challenging.
For sure. Well, for me, like if I send out my bio, like let's say, some Muslim organization or somebody wants me to like speak at some event, I send out the same bio to everybody. So it's going to highlight some of the work that I did, and it's going to include that research. So,
Mhm.
it's like a small pushback, but like, it's
Have
something
you
that's so
received
significant.
like have you actually received pushback from?
Never. Never, not even once. Maybe I'm fortunate, I don't know, or maybe people don't feel like it's the venue, or maybe people are just like, understanding or maybe they're not fazed by it. I would love to think it's the latter, right? But no, I've never ever received any kind of pushback about that.
Hmm. Hmm. And personally, what kind of I'm really interested in what kind of personal challenges that you have faced. Have you, like, at the intersection of your identities, being Muslim and being Black?
Yeah, well, I'm like, I am Muslim and I'm Black, but there's so many other parts of my identity too. But like those are for sure some of the most prominent ones. I guess people are highlighting like, at this moment. It can be really difficult to be Black and Muslim, and then particularly like Black and like Black Caribbean Muslim.
Hmm.
I know like in terms of numbers, we know that East African people from Somalia, Ethiopian people, Eritrean people, people from Djibouti, etc., East African people, they make up a massive majority of Black Muslims in cities like Toronto, right?
Mhm.
And so, you know, while we share, you know, certain commonalities of race when it comes to experience, right? We differ in many other ways, like, you know, in terms of language, culture, custom, ethnicity, all of these different things, right? So those, you know, like just explaining to people what type of Black Muslim you are, right? Or like where you're from. Are people automatically assuming that you're East African, right? Which, you know, it doesn't offend me obviously at all. But, you know, to explain to people that, you know, there's nuances in Black
Right.
Muslimness, right? That's sometimes can be a challenge. And then, you know, there's a challenge I think that Black Muslims generally that we face, which are, you know, in racism from people inside of our communities that's so deep and also goes so unacknowledged. Like people almost gaslight a lot of Black Muslims to think that, you know, Islam, there's no racism in our religion. And it's like, yeah, of course. Theologically, there's not supposed to be any racism, but we know that anecdotally and experientially, like there's a lot of racism, right? So trying to even explain to people, or like, you know, having people see you as a human being, or, you know, like not having someone like me, my parents, you know, are Muslim, like I'm born Muslim, people assuming that you converted
Mhm.
to Islam, right? Like there's just a very narrow gaze and understanding of what Muslim is, and then there's an even more narrow gaze and understanding of what Black Muslims are. And so it's challenging to continuously like push against that narrowness to expand it to fit what you are. So that can be like kind of difficult, but you know, I've been like in this body and doing this for like a while now. So, and I've, you know, I think I have like this, I think I have the understanding of how to do it, how to do it. But it still can be challenging.
So you've built up quite a bit of resilience over the years.
You have to, yeah. Yeah, you have to.
So as you were like rising, did you find, because obviously there's like a lot of times this, you know, crab in the bucket thing where,
Mm.
you know, when you're rising, people try to pull you down.
Hmm.
Did you find that you had that experience?
I'm gonna be honest, no. And maybe it has happened, but like maybe I don't recognize it. Like I just honestly like I just do what I'm supposed to do. Like people, I think that's one thing. If people who know me, like I just come to do what I like to do. Don't get me wrong. I like my fair share of drama and intrigue, like, you know, any other person. But generally, like I just come to do what I'm supposed to do, and that's about it.
And you
So
don't care what.
I try not to pay attention to that. I mean, but I am a sensitive person, so sometimes I take things personally, whereas somebody might roll off of their back. But it's a constant practice for me to not get caught up in like other people's images or understandings of me or their expectations. It's difficult for me sometimes, but yeah, I don't really experience that. And actually, I'll be honest, I think like a lot of people in my community and family, like they're really supportive of me, and they're the people who have made me feel inspired and energized to keep going when it can be difficult.
Hmm. Um, that's awesome. I'm happy to hear that. And going back to your identity, you said there's other identifiers that you have. Do you want to share what those are?
Well, yeah, like I'm a Muslim, you know. I'm not a Muslim, I'm a woman, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a particular, I think that being a woman, being a Black Muslim woman, there is a particular experience of womanhood or people who identify as women, right? Like for in Islam, that like unless you come from the tradition, it can be
Mhm.
difficult to explain, right? So just like the expectations that are placed on gender and what you're supposed to do versus what you're not supposed to do. And I think for me, like I've always been a bit of a rebel. My dad used to say, like, you've got a lot of edge, you just have to figure out how to use it. So, you know, when you're like a young girl and you're asking a lot of questions, like it's perceived in a certain way, right? When you're a woman, you know, a young woman, and you're asking a lot of questions and being challenging, it's perceived in a particular way, right? And when you put that within the confines of Islam, it can be even more, it can be even more like difficult to bust out of those those conventions. But definitely being a woman is like a big part of my identity. Another big part of my identity is like I'm really, really proudly like West Indian. Like I'm very Caribbean. I wasn't born in Barbados, but I'm a citizen by descent. I became a citizen when I was like in my 20s, and like I'm a proud descendant of, you know, Bajan, of Barbados, but like I look at the whole region as this entire like powerful and potentially even more powerful space where, you know, we've been contributing to popular culture, identity making. Our diasporas are incredibly strong, and so that's another piece of me. Like I'm an incredibly like proud Caribbean person. Like, and you know, my music, the foods that we eat, all of that stuff, it's things that I take a lot of pride and like ownership in, and I really, really it's really central to who I am.
Yeah, and that's you know, you exude confidence, and I think having a strong identity and knowing where you come from and who you are, I think probably influences you a tremendous amount. Out of curiosity, so what is a national dish from the Barbados?
So it's not the Barbados, it's just
All right.
Barbados. That's all right. Everybody that, and it's like such a
Yeah.
common, but it's the Bahamas. They're the only ones with the, I think maybe the Cayman Islands, or maybe it's not even I don't know. I could be wrong on that one, but a national, so the official national dish is something called kuku and flying fish. Kuku is like, you know, cornmeal.
Okay.
Basically, it's like turned cornmeal. So the cornmeal is actually cooked in the water of okra. And if you know okra, it's like
Mm-hmm.
a
A
slimy
bit
fruit.
slimy, yeah.
Yeah, so the water is like really thick and it just thickens the cornmeal in like a really nice way. It's like similar almost to Italian polenta, but it's more like we make it a little bit wetter. And then you make the flying fish is basically the small white fish. It's so delicious, and they don't fly, but they jump out of the water, and their gills are really long, so they look like wings. They're really cute. So we they're really cute. Yeah, they're adorable. So we get those, and like you just cook it up with like sauce and like, you know, green
Yeah.
peppers and onion and stuff like that,
I've
and
never
you
had that before. I'm such a
it's
foodie.
so good. You can't flying fish is hard to get now, but you can make it with any fish that you want. But my favorite Bayesian food is definitely something called fish cakes, and it's just salted cod. Basically, you make it into a batter. You take out the salt by boiling it or soaking it overnight, and you
Mhm.
make it into a batter with like flour and seasonings and stuff, and then you make these like little fish fritters. Oh my god, they're
Oh
amazing.
wow, that sounds really
Yeah,
good.
we eat a lot of fish there.
Yeah, I don't think I've had either of those dishes, and I'm not really familiar with like the Caribbean food. I think about is like doubles.
Jamaican food, Trinidadian food.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
what I mean, right? Like, so in the city, most of the popular restaurants are Jamaican. Some of them are Guyanese and some of them are Trinidadian. But there was one Bayesian restaurant on Queen West, but they closed down a few years ago. But like Bayesian food is not like, it's not popular like Jamaican food or like Trini food or Guyanese food, right?
right.
And you know, it's mostly stuff that your grandmother's gonna make or your parents are gonna make. And you get on like when you're going to Barbados, you know, you're gonna eat some good food. But like when you go to the island, the food is like everything is so fresh, organic, lots of fish and seafood. It's just delicious.
Well, it looks like a beautiful place to visit. So when's your next visit to Barbados?
I mean, I was gonna go like this. I should have been there right now, to be honest. I'm supposed to be up in the Caribbean all right now because I'm on the executive of something called the Caribbean Studies Association. And every year the conference happens in a different place. This year I was going to be in Guyana. And so I was going to either fly through Trinidad or fly through Barbados because there's no direct flight from Toronto. But I mean, I was lucky and actually I was very fortunate to have gone to Barbados over the winter holidays. And I came back early January. I was in Trinidad and Barbados.
Mhm.
And then I went to Brazil afterwards. So I mean, for me, like I'm just waiting for COVID to like let up. I'm going to Barbados ASAP. Like, but Barbados has like a mandatory government quarantine, 2-week quarantine for anybody who enters the island. So I'm not trying to do that. But as soon as they lift that and give us other ways to, you know, test before, I'm there in a heartbeat. Like I like to go.
You're out of here.
Yeah, I try to go like twice a year if I'm fortunate. So lately that's been happening. I love the island. It's beautiful.
That is awesome. And what's next for you with your research, and what are you planning to do moving forward?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, I've been the project manager of a project called Pathways to Care, and it's basically a systems level project that uses research methods to improve access to mental health care for Black children, youth, and their families in
Mhm.
Ontario. So in the province, Black youth face longer wait times, experience more barriers to care, have worse outcomes in comparison to white youth, and so and other groups of youth. And so this project is really meant to demystify the mental health care system. So what we've been doing is basically conducting research here to build a strategic framework that people, different organizations, both Black-led and mainstream, can adopt to essentially help Black youth and children who come to them and their families who come to them to get the kind of care that they need. So I'm really invested a lot in that work. I also teach part-time at York University. I
Oh,
teach
I didn't know that.
yeah, I'm a lecturer there, so it's pretty cool. With we have like a stream in medical anthropology, so I might teach a course next semester on infectious diseases. So I'll be talking a lot about COVID, Ebola, HIV/AIDS, etc. Yeah, teaching, and then yeah, like a lot of writing. I have a lot of writing projects that are I'm like very delinquent on right now. I've got a lot of editors
So,
calling me.
right. As a final question, how do you manage your time and
Mm.
you said you like to write. How do you go about scheduling that in and getting things done?
Well, I mean, I'm not like the best at this, I'm not gonna lie. Like every week I have to recalibrate, but what keeps me on point is calendars. So I have a journal called the Success Planner. It's by a woman who's based here in Toronto, the Greater Toronto area. Her name is Carlin Purcell. She developed this success planner that allows you to not only track your days in terms of scheduling, but it also like lets you track like things like outreach to your community, networking, exercise, drinking water. Like it's kind of like a really nice lifestyle based journal. So
Mhm.
I've been using that since January. It's been an amazing help. And then I usually sync that up with my calendar on my laptop and my calendar on my phone. So my calendar on my personal phone is like, I'm gonna go see my trainer on Saturday, for example. That's my personal phone. Or I have like a meeting that's not really work related, or I'm doing a panel that's in my personal phone. And then my work calendar keeps me on point for like all my work meetings. So yeah, that and Asana. Asana is like this project management software. I have a team of people who like work who basically work with me, right? And I'm like their boss. So they keep me on track too. Like they'll remind me, they'll send me reminder emails and things like that. They're helpful.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I hope a lot of people can check you out and see what you do. Obviously, what you're doing is super important. So, thank you so much,
Thank you.
and hope to see you in the gym soon when we open up.
I can't wait.
All right. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
You too. Like Sam.